Joel, it's an absolute pleasure to be connecting with you, man. We're recording this conversation in lieu of Future Whenua Summit. Future Whenua, yeah, we're trying to have the deepest possible exploration about what opportunities lie and how can we steer from what's considered as the conventional model of agriculture to something that's a bit more life-centric, and there's probably no person around that's influenced my personal perception on that matter than you. So thank you so much, man, for all the work that you've done in the years, and just as a farmer, as an educator, it's really brilliant. And yeah, you're an absolute legend, man. If I ask Google who the most famous farmer in the world is, it says Joel Salatin. You've been on Joe Rogan twice, awesome conversations there. And yeah, I just thought if we could kick things off as what makes a great farmer?
Oh wow, boy, you don't start off with light pitches, do you? You play hardball right out of the pocket. Okay, so what makes a good farmer? Well, I think if there's one trait that a farmer really needs, it's persistence. I always tell people that our success has not been necessarily because I'm extra clever or smart or anything. We were just too stubborn to give up. And I've been in this long enough now, all my life, that I've seen so many come and go, and to be able, and usually it's because they get tired of what my mentor Alan Nation used to call the slog. He said, be prepared for the slog. It's not always just perfectly temperature perfect and puffy clouds and green grass, and there's stuff that has to be done, and you have to enjoy doing that. And so you just have to stay with it. Are there times of you used the term rapture? Are there times of ecstasy and joy? Absolutely. But between those times, a lot of it is just putting up fence. I mean, this morning I was out, spent 3 hours chopping brambles and thorn bushes and stuff out of a fence line that we're putting in. I'm all beat up and cut up and splintered up and all that, but I love that kind of work because few things make me happier than putting order in something that's in disorder. And so you have to enjoy. You just have to enjoy the sheer work. I don't have to lift weights. I don't have to go to the racket club. I don't have to join the CrossFit gym. And that's a good thing. I think the second thing, so one, a character quality is persistence. Perhaps a spiritual quality and emotional and spiritual is you have to have a vision that what you're doing is noble, sacred, and bigger than you, that you're doing something bigger than yourself. And we run this apprenticeship and stewardship program here, and we attract young people. Young people are still very much attracted to missions that are that have sacred power to them. And so we're not just here raising cows. We're not just here gathering eggs. We are a part of planetary healing, and that's a pretty big mission. And so it's an attractive thing for people to be. People want to be a part of big missions, big visions. They want to be a part of that. And so for me, the work that I do is not just, well, we have to do this today. It's actually a component of a much bigger vision. And that helps you through those difficult times.
Awesome. Yeah. So tenacity and connecting to a deeper purpose. It's very much yeah, to be a great farmer, just to be a member of life. It's Tony Robbins says the quality of someone's life is in direct proportion to the amount of uncertainty or adversity that they can handle. And so that's like that tenacity thing. Sometimes I'm out on the farm and I'm just in pure bliss. I'm driving around and checking feed, and other times is we've got pink eye or fly strike, and it's way more niggly, but yeah, being able to run with those tougher times.
Yeah, and to realize that you're simply in a continuum of journey. You never arrive, you never get done learning, and you never get done refining. You're always refining, you're learning, and you're on this journey. And I think many farmers burn out. They burn out at feeling like they're not making progress. And of course, progress requires creativity and innovation. You've got to look at things. I was thinking about today, actually, as I was cutting out these some of these bramble bushes, and this is the first time we've been on this farm, and of course, it's been traditionally managed before now. And I'm looking at these bramble bushes, and they've obviously been herbicided. They've been sprayed. But we're at spring here. We're in the northern hemisphere. We're at spring, and so I'm looking at these bushes. They've obviously been sprayed with herbicide. Who knows how many times? And a lot of the base, appears to be dead. But guess what? There's all these new buds coming out, out on the tips of the plants. Clearly, the herbicide didn't kill them. But we watch these farmers. We watch these guys go out with their little spray rigs, and they spray every year. They spray thistles, they spray weeds, they spray this every single year. And you know what? They come back every single year, and so wouldn't a thinking person, I'm being, I don't want to be condescending, but it's frustrating at the level of doing the same thing. I mean, they want to get rid of them, but they do the same thing year after year after year after year for 20 years and don't actually make any progress. And, I would like to think that if I did the same thing for, a couple of years and didn't see a change, I'd be out asking advice, trying some different things. I'd be out trying to do something different. And so I think a willingness to depart from the orthodoxy and to observe enough to realize you got to make a change. Probably my best, I've got numerous stories of that, but one of my best stories of that is back, goodness, dad was still alive. I mean, we're going back now to the early 1970s. And this is before you were born, Zebulon, so we're way back there. And so we were putting this hay in the barn and feeding hay in the wintertime. And the farm, the fertility was so poor on the farm that we only had like 10, 12 cows. And now we have 100 and have plenty of feed, but that was back in the early days when it was just rocks and gullies. And anyway, so we're feeding this hay in the barn, and they're on a concrete floor. And every week, one of our chores every single week was we cleaned out that floor. We didn't have a front end loader. We hand forked it, but it was only 12 cows in a week, so we could fill a manure spreader by hand, and we go out and we spread it on the field. And we did this for a couple of years and started noticing what we spread like pre-February 15, February 20, what we spread before then, when spring came, you couldn't tell you'd been any place. But what we spread after February 20th, roughly, it looked like you laid down green paint and the grass grew 4 times better than anywhere else. And, we're looking at that saying it's the same field, same material, same cows, same farm. What's the difference between January 1 and February 20? What's the difference? And we realized, the aha was, oh, the soil is hibernating, it's sleeping. I mean, it's might be covered up with 2 feet of snow, but it's frozen. It's sleeping. It can't metabolize nutrients, whether they're organic, inorganic, or whatever. The soil can't metabolize the nutrients because the actinomycetes, the gibberellins, the mycorrhizae, they're all sleeping and they can't eat. And so between January 1 and spring, all of those nutrients are leaching, they're either leaching into the groundwater or they're vaporizing into the air. We're losing those nutrients. And so that moved us to, well, okay, so how can we eliminate the loss? We went to the deep bedding with the carbonaceous diaper approach, and one thing led to another until now we do the large scale composting with pigs. And now we're taking out tons and tons and tons of material in compost every year. But that observation, realizing that we were losing those nutrients, that was the seed that today has created such a tremendous organic matter in our soils and productivity through the composting process.
Very cool. Yeah, composting is such a representation of the circle of life and everything that we need to be focusing on. You've given us a bit of a visual there. Could you expound on that? Maybe give us sort of like a high level overview, just visual tour of Polyface Farms and what you've got going on at the moment.
Sure. So right now we're in that winter to spring transition where things that have been inside are going outside. So, during the winter, we have we have hoop houses, big hoop houses, and they have rabbits and chickens and pigs in them. And as I'm talking with you right now, I'm watching Daniel, my son, and a couple of apprentices out there. They're actually cleaning those hoop houses out because we just took the chickens out this week. And so they're cleaning them out so that we can spread all that carbonaceous diaper, that deep litter. We can spread that on the fields, and that's going to open up the hoop houses now to go in and plant vegetables. So we'll be ready to plant vegetables in it, literally, within a couple of days of the chickens coming out. So the chickens now are out on pasture in portable big A-frames. So these are the layers, not the broilers, but the layers in roughly 1,000 bird flocks here and at rental properties as well. And they're surrounded by electric poultry netting. We move them every couple of days to a new spot and just, rotate them through the field like that. The cows, we have some on grass, some are not yet. We're in the last little throes of feeding hay. We plan to stop all hay feeding probably middle of next week. So, before March 1st, I'm sorry, before April 1st. And of course, all the neighbors, they'll continue full feeding hay, till for another month. And so we move the cows every day to a new spot, and move them along. The pigs are now where the cows were when we feed the hay to the cows. The cows are on this deep carbonaceous diaper, and it'll get more than a meter deep. We add corn to it. The corn ferments in that bedding pack because the cows tromp out the oxygen. And then when the cows come out to graze, then the pigs go in. The pigs then seek the fermented corn and in like a big egg beater and oxygenate it, convert it from anaerobic to aerobic compost. And so in another 3 to 4 weeks, we'll be spreading all of that material and cleaning out those hay feeding shelters for the cows. And the pigs then They are beginning to go out on pasture. We were going to get a batch out this week, but we didn't make it. We had a water line issue, so they'll go out next week, the first ones, and then they'll all be out, within another 3 or 4 weeks, all out on pig pastures, where we move them every 5 to 12 days from paddock to paddock to paddock as they go through the field. Next week, so here the last week in March, we'll get our first batch of broiler chicks, the meat chickens. And those will come in, and in 3 weeks, they'll be out on pasture as well in floorless little cubicles that are roughly 3 meters wide, 4 meters long, and 2/3 of a meter high. And we floorless, and we move them every morning. We put 75 birds in each one, and one person can move 60 of those shelters in 60 minutes, 1 minute per move. So one person can move 4,500 chickens in 1 hour without starting an engine or running a machine or tractor or anything over the field, just your footsteps and the quiet of the morning. And those shelters protect them from aerial predators, ground predators, and all sorts of and weather, both predators and weather, because they're going to go out there, whatever, 3 weeks old. They're pretty small when they go out. So every starling and crow and possum and raccoon and everything, that they all like chicken, and so those little birds are pretty vulnerable. So the completely enclosed but moved every day to a new spot ensures safety and comfort for the little birds. We'll probably get our first turkeys in another month or so. The ducks, the khaki Campbell ducks for eggs, they just went out yesterday, I think, 2 days, maybe 2 days ago. So they're in a netting, and they're moved every day along the field with a portable shelter over them. And what else is, the lambs are just getting ready to start lambing. All the ewes are heavy, and they're in, of course, a net, and they're moved every day along as well. So there's a lot of moving going on, but all of this stuff is animals move. That's one of the first things you notice in nature, isn't it? When you look at nature, is animals don't stay in the same place. They move, and there are a lot of reasons for that movement, but that's what we do. It stimulates the production, stimulates the ecology, and it keeps everything healthy enough that we don't have to worry about a vet bill. And we are running over 1,000 head of cattle, so this is not a backyard operation. It's pretty significant, and to not have a vet bill with that many animals is pretty fun.
Yeah, that's really inspiring hearing all of that action, and it's very diverse, which I'm sure we'll get back to. But so that's sort of things on a livestock. How about, you said Daniel was outside with a couple of helpers. So you've got like a cadet program. Is that the case? And also,
Yeah.
what do you have in line in terms of agritourism? I know people are visiting Polyface often. What's in store on that front as well?
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Well, let's take those one step at a time. Let's start with the apprenticeship program. So we kind of have a 2-stage apprenticeship program. It starts, I liked you saying cadets. That was kind of cool. Cadets. So our Polyface boot camp is what we call our stewardship program. And we take 11 a year, starting May 1 to September 30. So it's a 5-month program. And we, they live on the farm. We have so May 1st, our on-farm chef comes. So we have a chef who cooks our evening meals for us, and all of us who live on the farm enjoy a family evening meal Monday through Friday. That is significant. That is important for camaraderie, for esprit de corps, and it gives us a time at the end of the day. Everybody can work hard and put out, knowing that at 6 o'clock there's going to be this wonderful dinner prepared from things that they've been growing, and so there's this wonderful familial kind of thing. And of course, we can talk about the day, we can talk about the next day. Often we have visitors, and they give a little 5-minute talk. We call it sing for your supper. And often I'll bring an interesting whatever email or something, and I'll say, hey, I got this question today. How would you answer it? And it's all part of creating a climate that's both very obviously physical, hands-on, but also intellectually stimulating and has some academic. We do formal lectures. We go on field trips. They have to read a book. So we have plenty of the academic part along with the hands-on. At the midpoint of the stewardship, if they want to stay for the apprenticeship, then they put the ones that want to stay put their names in a pot, and then we select anywhere from normally 3 or 4 of those to stay on for another year from October 15 to October 15 as apprentices. So this year's apprentices were stewards last year. That creates tremendous continuity in the program. Of course, the apprentices are the first level managers of the stewards. And, they say you don't really learn something till you teach it. And so the nice thing about putting the apprentices in charge, so when the stewards leave September 30, the apprentices, then they are with us more intimately, if you will, through the whole winter. And so by May 1, they've been here now a year, and they're really into it. I mean, they know a lot more. They just have a much more intimate. And during the winter, they read a book on leadership. Daniel goes through it chapter by chapter on how to develop leadership qualities. And we spend a lot of time, Zebulon, on relationships. I can tell you that developing this program and having it work smoothly and functionally has taken as much creativity and persistence as developing the production protocols that attract these young people, anyway. I mean, you take 11 people from all over, throw them together in this intimate a setting. You can imagine, that's when it's good, it's very good, and when it's bad, it's not good at all. And so we put a lot of emphasis on how do you keep relationships tender. Somebody snores and somebody doesn't. Somebody's a messy, somebody's a cleanie. How do you get together and mesh? And so the apprentices are actually the first sounding board. As you can imagine, I'm the last to get. I'm the last to know things. I'm the whatever. I'm the guru, the god, the whatever. And so I depend completely on these other young people that are closer and running interference, and in a lot of ways, I mean, I try to be as open as I can be, but there's just a space there. There is, and there's nothing I can do about it. It just, I mean, not just age, but just whatever, respect, whatever. And so yeah, so that's the program, and it's very formal. We have high expectations. Everybody gets a big notebook. I mean, we have SOPs, standard operating procedures. Like, for example, moving a broiler shelter is a 6-page SOP, and we give tests on this. We want them to read it. We want them to assimilate it, and so we give pop quizzes with that are serious and obviously plenty of humor too. So it's not arduous, but it's a very, very intimate thing. And I mean, we just love these young people. We basically, adopt them as our own children, and we just love it. And I'll tell you, do they make mistakes? Yeah. Do they lose tools? Yeah. They make some big mistakes and lose things and all that. But, that comes with the territory, and we have to be willing to appreciate that we would be gentle on our own child, and so we need to be gentle on them as well. I mean, there are times to not be gentle, if somebody's being completely negligent or out of the picture, but generally everybody's trying their hardest. They all mean well. They're trying to please, and so it's important for us to honor that intentionality on their part, even when they're making a big mistake or whatever. So that's kind of the apprenticeship, the stewardship apprenticeship thing. Interestingly, last year, the 4 apprentices all wanted to stay on our as full-time team members. So we were able to place all 4 of them in spots where they could enjoy and be part of our full-time team. And that doesn't happen very often, but it did last year. We kind of had a jump up, and now we just hope everybody can get paid. We're trying to, if we need more staff or new people, we for sure find it best to grow them from the inside. When you've sweated alongside somebody for a year, you know them pretty well. And one of the interesting things relationally is that deep relationships only happen when you go through adversity together. This is one reason why soldiers develop such close friendship, and sports teams such close friendships. When you when you get clobbered in a game, everybody goes through that adversity, and it builds deep relationships. The point is that you don't build deep relationships at the bar where everybody's just jocular and having a good time. Parties do not build deep relationships. It's in the crucible of life where you're in adversity. That's where lifelong, very, very deep relationships get built. And so with the farm, with what we're doing here with our work, we're automatically pushed, physically. We need to get things done. And I don't want to make this sound like it's adversity. I mean, I love it. Okay. But it is, it's strenuous. I mean, you're sweating, you get dirty, you're pushing, and you're trying to make benchmark. You're trying to get this done. And so we're in that crucible together, and it's a profound thing. And I'll just finish that portion by saying this, that probably one of the things that breaks my heart most about farmers is that most of them, when they get my age, so I'm 65 and not ashamed of it. I'm still in pretty good shape. If you don't believe so, you just come as a young person and stay with me all day. Let's see what we get done. But anyway, so I'm 65, and it breaks my heart that so many farmers my age are alone. They're empty nesters. The kids don't want the farm. They don't want to do it because it for whatever reason, it was not attractive. It couldn't pay salaries, any number of things. And of course, every farm kid doesn't have to be a farmer. I'm not asking for that, but it's tragic that so many farmers my age are alone. And so to be surrounded every day, right now, there's 25 of us that earn our salaries here from the farm. And to be surrounded by this level of bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, self-starter, enthusiastic young people is brings me to tears, because I can't imagine trying to continue out there every day through the workload, the slog alone, as you begin to age, and you don't have youthful enthusiasm and excitement. And I just can't imagine. So I'm so thankful and blessed to be surrounded by this enthusiastic, youthful team. I mean, Daniel's now 40, and so we're both getting a little older. But we have apprentice managers that are younger. We have our median age here is probably 30, and so that's a great benchmark of a vibrant business when the majority of the people are younger than 35. And so I just put that out. I meet a lot of older farmers. Oh man, I don't want anybody around me. The reason Matilda and I came to the farm is because we didn't want anybody around us. I'm a better friend with my tractor than I am, my wife, that kind of thing. And that sounds machismo, and it sounds, macho and all that. But at the end of the day, when your knees are hurting and it's a long day, and you have to drag yourself back out there and back in alone, it's hard to keep the fire in the belly. It's really hard to keep the fire in the belly, which is why I've now come to the conclusion that you don't actually have a sustainable farm. I mean, we love to talk about ecology and soils and things like that, but a true regenerative farm, I think, has to be generating 2 salaries from 2 different generations. If you're not generating 2 salaries from 2 different generations, you do not have a successional platform that works. And what's more regenerative than succession, and what's more unregenerative than no succession? And so that's where I am at. You asked about agritourism, and so probably the single biggest enterprise development that we've started here. We started last spring. So this was definitely driven by COVID. And so let's back up. 2020, COVID comes, 2019, I had, I don't know what, 6, 7 international trips scheduled. I'm traveling, speaking around the country, all that. Well, 2020, everything stops, everything cancels. It's all done. Nobody wants to meet anywhere. Nobody wants to get together. The whole thing just grinds to a halt. And so we're through a series of circumstances. We got to thinking here and said, well, by the end of 2020, people are getting tired of it. We're feeling there's a restlessness. I mean, not among everybody, but some groups that I want to say this gingerly and carefully. I do believe COVID is a thing, but I don't think the orthodox message or protocols to deal with it have been the best. And so anyway, there are groups, organizations that wanted to get together in 2021, but didn't want to do it at a hotel with HVAC, with recirculated air, with mask mandates and vaccine mandates and all sorts of things. And so in the winter of right before 2021, in that winter, I let the word get out, hey, if you're in an organization and you'd like to get together and you don't want to do it at a conference center with recirculated air, you want to do it out on a farm with nice clean air and sunshine and places to run, let us know. Call us and let's talk about hosting your gathering here. And we had six organizations contact us and said, yes, that appeals to us. We would like to get together. And we can't think of a cleaner, better place to do it than, on the farm. And so we did 6 of them last year. We call them gatherings. And we're limited to, about 300 to 325 people, which seems to be a sweet spot. 300 is enough that you feel like, ooh, this is a real deal. It's a happening thing, but it's not so many that you feel like you're lost in a crowd. And so that was the many that we could handle. We could feed them. We could park their cars. We could have them here. And I'll tell you what, last year, 2021, people still weren't really getting together much, but the people who came here, those 6 gatherings, they left levitating. I mean, we didn't have any mandates. We come as you are. People hugged, people, just, and nobody got sick afterwards. We were accused by the local newspaper of having, super spreader events and all this stuff. No. I'm convinced that people got such an immunological bump from seeing faces and hugging and interacting that probably, counteracted any viral trajectory that there was. Anyway, it went fantastic. And it was extremely synergistic with the overall mission of the farm. We picked up a lot of customers. We were able to feed them, and so they were able to see the farm. A lot of people came who had never even heard of regenerative agriculture, ever having heard of pastured livestock, because they were coming for, with another, maybe an economic investment group, something. So these were not farming things necessarily. They were not, they were just a group that wanted to get together that was, okay, let's agree, was a little bit rebellious, or liberty, freedom minded. And so we offered that platform, and it was fantastic. And so this year we've doubled down on it. We've got 6 scheduled right now for this year. A couple more are circling. And we're actually building a real nice pavilion, kind of an amphitheater. It's on a hillside, 3 terraces, kind of like an amphitheater that we're building. Last year we did it all in one of our great big hoop houses, 30 feet by 120 feet, and it's a big hoop house. And it worked great in the early spring and fall, but in the middle of the summer, even with shade cloth, even with the sides rolled up, we just could not get that comfortable enough for people from the city who were used to living in air conditioning. For us, we don't mind. We sweat all the time anyway, but the urban person coming out, they need a little more comfort. So we're building this nice pavilion right now. We've cut all the poles. We've milled all the boards for it. We had the excavation done 2 weeks ago, so the terraces are in, and we're putting the poles in now. And looking for our first gathering is May 7. May 7. So we've got now, a little over a month to get this done, and hopefully we'll have it up by then. But this, using the farm as a nexus for information, fellowship, and physical nurture. Think about that, those 3 things: physical nurture, relational fellowship, and information transfer. If a farm can be the platform for those 3 things to happen, that is a completely symbiotic enterprise that can work with almost any farm. And so why don't we take all those billions of dollars that Hilton and Marriott and Sheraton and the great big global hospitality resort centers have, why don't we take at least a few of those billions of dollars and let's spread them out on farms that are savvy and ready to offer their place as a meeting platform, as a gathering platform for physical nurture, fellowship, relationship, and information transfer.
That's absolutely amazing, man. There's a lot to unpack there. Thank you for sharing so deeply and fluently. yeah, that's a fundamental aspect of this summit is yeah, what underlies some of the issues that we're up against in the world is this thing about separation, and there's a separation from each other and from us and our true selves, and of course a separation with nature. So if we can, yeah, with this, you know, in my studies and at Lincoln, you know, we're learning about agriculture, but we're sitting in a, you know, terraced seating, and I've been to a couple of conferences, and again we're in this sort of sterile or urban environment. And then so if we can bring that conversation and have it on the whenua, and we can have bare feet on the ground while we're learning about the future of agriculture, or just anything, as you said in your gatherings, it can heal that separation on a deep level. And yeah, and just the whole thing about the way that you're bringing people to your farm, and not just growing all this nutritious and tasty food, but also growing farmers, and you know, creating the new wave of people that we can adopt the system. That's so inspiring. And absolutely hear you with the tragedy of the rural isolation mindset, and this sort of macho, no, I'm going to do it all myself, and I'm going to be out here, and I want to. And so maybe we'll just expand on that. How could the orthodoxy of very singular one man or one family units managing large areas, how could that change to an orthodoxy of inclusiveness and teaching? You know, does it require everyone just to be zapped with some sort of Joel Salatin vibe, or could there be structures to make that more easy?
What a great question, and thank you for pursuing that. Yeah, I knew I went on at length there, and so feel free to jump in and cut me off when I'm going on too long. But yeah, what a great question. So I think this starts, if you're familiar with Stephen Covey's iconic book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. One of those habits is you have to start with the end in view. And his analogy is you're building a house, and before you build the house, you have to have a blueprint. Before you have a blueprint, you have to have something in your head. You know, do you want a single story, 2-story, a Cape Cod? Do you want a brick rancher? You know, so what everything that we do and accomplish starts in the mind. It starts in the head. And so I think, to answer this question, as silly as it may sound, it starts with a person desiring a partner, a team, just somebody else besides himself or herself. And I think most farmers don't actually start out desiring a second person. You know, agriculture schools don't encourage that. And so I remember very well when Teresa and I first got married, and we were talking about the future, and and what was our vision for the future. And I remember like yesterday just telling her, and this is back 40 years ago. I said, well, my dream is to grow old having the grandchildren fighting over who gets to spend the day with grandpa here on the farm. And that was my dream, and in large part, that's exactly what has developed here. And so again, it breaks my heart when I hear old farmers encouraging you don't want to farm, pushing their kids away. You don't want this for yourself. I want something better for you. Why don't you go to college and be a doctor or an accountant, or, work in IT or something. And so it starts with the farmer understanding the nobility and sacredness of our vocation. Farmers, especially in the developed world, and I don't use that to condescend against the undeveloped. I'm just using that so we we know in the Western, whatever, rich, wealthy nations, farming as a vocation has been marginalized. Goodness, we had an apprentice. We had an apprentice that fell in love with a girl in Canada, and he lived like 10 miles on the U.S. side of the Canadian border. They'd met at a camp together, and they wanted to get married. And so he filled out the paperwork for the Immigration Naturalization Service for her to come across and to be an American as his bride. And so when he filled out, he put his vocation as farmer, and the U.S. Industrial Immigration Naturalization Service said they denied his request to bring her across the border on the basis that farming was not a valid vocation. I mean, that was the official position. That was the official position of the government, that farming was so risky, so high risk, that a couple planning to do it would end up whatever as wards of the state, or whatever. I don't want to go into all the to unpack all that means, but we generally, as a culture, we don't encourage our young people to go into farming. In fact, we've even had parents call us on their, they found out that their child applied here to be an apprentice, and they say, would you please discourage them from doing that? We didn't pay for college for them to go, work in the dirt. And there's this kind of thing. And so farmers, I think generally, if I may encourage farmers kind of have this beat down societal disrespect that, well, I must not be very smart, because if I was smart, I'd go be an attorney or work in develop video games or something. There's this kind of mentality, and I really get on my soapbox on this. There is no vocation more noble and sacred and important and right than the stewards of our air, soil, and water, of our natural resources. I mean, that's, you can't have a successful culture until you have successful earthworms. I mean, it doesn't work. And so farmers need to appreciate their value, and as that, they need to appreciate that this is a calling and a mission that society needs, that's worthwhile, that's very, very important. Now, that being said, the other thing then is that so you have a farmer. You have a farmer, and you're trying to decide where your future goes, and so you need to be able to conceive and to think about additional income streams, additional enterprises. And very, very few farmers actually conceive of additional enterprises. I raise sheep, I raise cows, I have a dairy, I do apples, I do an apple orchard, and sell, and very often they think about themselves as single enterprise entities. And so one of the most important things that a farm can do to generate additional income, additional salaries, is to add complementary enterprises to that farm business. And as you add additional enterprises that are complementary to what we call the mothership, then you start actually developing additional additional opportunities. So if you're raising sheep, can you add poultry? I mean, that's very complementary, doesn't detract at all from any of the land. Could you add some orchard and let the sheep graze under the apple trees? There are additional enterprises that you can do. Furthermore, you could take your enterprise to another level. Maybe instead of just selling lamb, maybe you could put in a kitchen and sell lamb stew, okay, as a heat and eat, a frozen heat and eat meal. And the next generation, generates their income that way. My point is that the average farm needs additional income points, income enterprises, in order to actually fill up the resource base. There's not a farm, including ours, that has actually filled up the enterprise potential on their resource base. I'm not talking about conquistador exploitation. I'm talking about leveraging the resource and actually leaving more air, more soil, more water there than was there when you started, through complementary leveraging enterprises.
Yeah, this idea of stacking fiefdoms, as you've called it, I think that's really essential as we're moving forward here. How do we, because they can feed, you were describing the pigs, how they follow the cows, they work together in ways that can really create more value of an area of land. And I suppose that comes off the back of this community creation and having more people, because it's a lot to manage for one person, but when you've got teams and someone can take care. And so there's this dilemma with diversity about, with diversity comes inefficiency. Could you speak to that, and also maybe like perhaps there's inefficiency at the beginning, but as these models became the orthodoxy, would there all of a sudden become this efficiencies of scale because this model is being replicated around?
Yeah, that's a very insightful question. So I guess my answer starts with resiliency. We tend to think, in business terms, we think about efficiency, but the first thing we have to have in any business, including a farm business, is resiliency. Because if you don't start with resiliency, you don't have anything that survives to be efficient about. If the thing fails and doesn't sustain, then efficiency becomes a moot point if you first don't start with resiliency. And so I think looking at our farm enterprises, so asking the question, what would make this resilient? And resilient includes, how do we make more soil and more fertile soil, more earthworms? How do we hydrate the landscape? How do we reduce raindrops, running off surface runoff? How do we reduce our petroleum needs? How do we reduce our fertilizer needs? How do we, so in a business, there's only really three ways to increase profit. You can either reduce costs, increase price, or increase turnover. So, if you have a positive margin, you can, of course, increase turnover, just volume, what we call scale. And so generally, farms only view the third one, turnover, as the only option. But there are lots of options on the front end, reducing, for example, we have never bought a bag of chemical fertilizer here. Never bought a bag. Okay. And so here we are with, what's happening to fertilizer costs. Fertilizer costs have gone up, 400% now in about 14 months. I mean, it's unbelievable. And we don't buy any of it. Now who's resilient? And so that's the first thing. You need to deal with resiliency first. And then once you are resilient, yes, you want to be as efficient as possible, but you start you start making relationships that are highly efficient. For example, our hundreds of tons of compost that we spread, we don't turn it with a machine. It takes us no labor and no petroleum and no machinery to turn all that. We do it with pigs, and pigs are happy to do it. They love to do it, and I mean, they're out there working right now. You and I are talking. Those pigs are out there turning compost right now. And so that creates its own efficiency, because we're not having to use equipment, machinery, and our time, our labor to do that project. It's all being done by the pigs. And what's time to a pig? They don't care how much time it takes, and they love to do it. The eggmobile that follows the cows. So the cows move every day. The eggmobile follows them a couple of days behind. The chickens scratch through the cow patties and eat out the fly larvae. And not only does that create sanitation for the cows, it also scatters the cow pies out, so they cover way more ground, and you don't have all these little green spots. You get a much better soil metabolism and digestion across the landscape. And so in some ways, the eggs are simply a byproduct of the pasture sanitation program. So, when you start really integrating synergistic plant and animal functions, which is what nature does, you start tapping into a new set of efficiencies that the orthodox system, that is highly segregated, highly singular, it's segregated and it's singular, that they can't imagine. They can't imagine those kinds of synergies. I mean, we're today we got the racking house cleaned out from the pigs in the winter, and we spread all that compost. We went right in with new wood chip bedding, and so today I'm sure today they started moving the rabbits in there, and we'll be putting the chickens in there. So we'll have the rabbits and the chickens in there, so that same structure, the structure that got used for pigs in the winter, gets used for rabbits and chickens in the summer. And so if you're going to have a structure, you want to run as many different kinds of enterprises through it. That way you don't have a buildup of pathogens. If you keep the same enterprise running through a structure all the time, you gradually build up pathogens in that structure, because there's always a host. There's no break point. So you can either trade hosts or you can vacate. Well, I'd rather trade hosts, because most hosts are dead end to the other species pathogen. So all of that creates it sounds like a lot of movement, and certainly it is. It is a lot of movement, but I'll tell you what, it takes a lot of movement to borrow money and to figure out how to pay for all the petroleum, and to go on bended knee to the banker, and not have your kids want to stay on the farm too. That's a lot of movement that I would suggest is negative movement. I'd rather have positive movement that makes me not have to deal with that negative movement. I mean, things are going to move anyway, so we might as well put it on movement that's progressive rather than regressive.
Awesome. This idea of resilience, it's a localized system is much more resilient than what we're doing now. This huge global, every step in the chain, there's many steps in the chain for a meal that comes to me from the supermarket. It's coming from all over the place. And whereas if I could get meat from my neighbor and produce from down the road, but like here in Southland, we produce a lot of meat, grains, and dairy, and yet and little else. There's small examples of other enterprise, but even those things that we're kingpins at, I don't have access to that. I can't go to the store very easily and buy a beef roast that's come from my area, and I can't as a lamb producer sell my lamb, and so Yeah, and the carrot producers, you know, they send it up to Christchurch to get washed and packaged, and then they come back down. And I just wonder what role does localized or small scale processing have to play in the future we're moving towards?
Oh, you know, my self-made moniker is Christian libertarian environmentalist capitalist lunatic farmer. And so the libertarian part of that speaks directly to this. And of course, you know, I wrote a book, Everything I Want to Do is Illegal. Um, and it explains the run-ins we've had with the bureaucracy, with what we call the food police. And you know, my bottom line is this, um, there is I'm not going to debate whether there should be a bunch of inspection and food safety regulations and things for a system in which there is no personal contact. Okay. But if there is a close relationship, a feedback audit, if you will, then at some point we should be able to interact in food commerce without a bureaucrat standing in the middle of that transaction. If you want a good parallel for those that are listening that maybe are a little more whatever socialistically minded, and the word libertarian kind of is a bit of an affront, I would simply suggest that think about the way Uber works. So I call this the Uberization of food. Who would have guessed 30 years ago that people all over the world would jump in cars with people who haven't had any training in chauffeuring. They haven't even had their cars checked for, you know, an ability to be a chauffeur, you know, a taxi or a limousine or anything. And people jump into cars with these people, total strangers. They're not vetted by a union. They're not vetted by, you know, a little, you know, ID tag hanging because they're a member of the taxi cab, you know, outfit. They're just people, strangers, you know, and you jump in a car with them and say, hey, take me to so-and-so, and you go there. How does that work? The reason it works is because the driver, if you're an obnoxious passenger, the driver can give you a black mark and you won't get a ride anymore. And by the same token, if I'm a rider and the driver is obnoxious, I can black mark the driver and the driver doesn't get any riders anymore. So because there is a real-time feedback loop using the internet, it creates authentic, it creates accountability within the system that is completely outside the domain of government regulators, government bureaucracy, and it works very well. Thank you very much. Airbnb is another one. Airbnb, you know, who would have guessed 30 years ago that that globally Airbnb would create more hospitality rooms in the world than Sheraton and Marriott and Hilton combined, and never drive a nail or build another wall. You know, who would have guessed? Why does it work? For the same reason Uber works. You're going out in the middle of nowhere with somebody you've never met, a total stranger, and you're going to spend the night. What if they're a, you know, what if they're a killer? What if they're, you know, well, it's because the system has its own checks and balances because of real-time monitoring and auditing. And so I just use those two as an example of where local food systems, where if you and I want to do business together, we should be able to transact, to make that transaction between the two of us as consenting adults. And I'm using some, you know, powerful language here, as voluntary consenting adults to engage in a consensual relationship, okay, regarding our food, regarding what we're going to eat. I mean, we tell the government to get out of our bedroom. We tell the government to get out of our marriages. We tell the government to get out of our sexual identity. You know, we've got all this liberation going on, but when it comes to food, suddenly we can't eat a morsel that doesn't have some sort of government stamp on it. And that fact is the single biggest hurdle that is keeping people who want to buy locally from being able to buy locally, and people who want to sell locally from being able to sell locally.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a sort of tech platform idea tied in amongst that answer. I like the idea of exploring that. But let's say you get out of farming and run for president, and you know, crazier things have happened. You get it. What law changes would you make, particularly flowing on from that, or just
Sure.
in general to enable this, you know, more beautiful model of farming?
Yeah. So whenever I get asked, you know, if you were whatever president if you were king for the day, because a president can't just do anything he wants to do. So let's be a king. All right. If you if you were king for a day, you know, what would you do? And what I would do is I would grant every citizen the freedom to purchase their own food from the source of their choice, as long as the source was voluntary. I mean, I can't go and stick a gun in a farmer's head and say, I want your carrots. Okay. But if the farmer's willing to sell them to me and I'm willing to buy them, we should be able to make that transaction without any government involvement. And if we had something like that, you would see an explosion. I mean, an explosion of on-farm abattoirs, on-farm kitchens, because people want convenience. All right. So you know, we sell heavy stews, you know, beef stew, chicken broth, things like that. But we can't do it here on the farm without an inspected kitchen and driving through hoops. I mean, it is illegal. This is one you'll really love. It's illegal for us to cut. So we have a sawmill, so we can go to the woods and cut a tree, and we can saw it up into boards on our sawmill, but we cannot legally make a chair out of that lumber and sell it to a neighbor, because that's manufacturing, and manufacturing is illegal in an agricultural zone. So this has nothing to do with food safety. This is just zoning. And so what we have is an incredible oppression, a tyranny of individuals like you and I, just from our own entrepreneurial desire to be able to transact credible food and fiber business with our neighbors. And that is something that needs to be needs to be stopped, because again, I'm not saying eliminating all food. I don't want to get into that argument right now. But when you have a relational thing, and you have two people wanting to interact voluntarily, you know, we should be able to have that level of freedom, you know, at some point we should be able to transact food and fiber business on a personal level, neighbor to neighbor, without a federal bureaucrat involved.
It's very, very well said. And there is a place for regulation, of course, because there are laggards and there are, you know, cowboys that, but sure. I know the meat that I produce and process for ourselves is completely sanitary and high quality. And I know my neighbor that grows milk is doing the same. It's, you know, keep the regulation for the laggards, but, you know, release these caps that are stopping advancement.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. You've talked a bit about progress. What is healthy progress, or progress in alignment with nature?
Healthy progress in alignment with nature. Well, I mean, let's think about the things we would like to see improved. Here in the U.S., you know, we lead the world in chronic morbidity. We lead the world in per capita cancer, heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, you know, lots of these chronic health issues. And so how we would know that we're making progress is that those numbers would start to decrease instead of increase. But right now, all the actuarials indicate that these things are increasing. And so just like we would know that we're doing better with our kids if we had fewer juvenile detention centers, for example, and we were doing better in our marriages if we had fewer divorces, we would know that we're doing better on our health if we started shutting down hospitals because we didn't need as many. Wouldn't that be a strange kettle of fish? So you know, monitoring progress is not always easy, but I think if you make benchmarks, this is progress, this is progress, in other words, look, it's not progress to be able to afford to build more hospitals because more people are sick. That's not progress. And the biggest problem we have is that, at least in the West, we measure cultural societal health with gross domestic product, GDP, we call it, gross domestic product. Well, the problem is gross domestic product does not separate liabilities from assets. And so, for example, if I go out here and pollute the creek out here, dump a bunch of toxins in it, and the government has to come in with private contractors and put styrofoam you know, catchment in it and spend a week, you know, cleaning it up, that goes in as positive gross domestic product because we had to hire somebody, buy a bunch of fuel, buy a bunch of trucks and equipment, and it goes in as positive gross domestic product. My point is that as long as society cannot separate liability expenditures from asset you know, progress income, we're kind of going to be doomed to fail. I mean, every time a prison is built, that should go on as negative GDP. Every time a juvenile detention center is built, that should be negative GDP. Every time a dead zone, the U.S. now has 700 riparian dead zones. The biggest one is the Gulf of Mexico. It's the size of Rhode Island, the state of Rhode Island. You know, I don't know what the value is. What's the value of the fact that none of those crabs and shrimp and fish are being produced in those waters, and there aren't any fishermen able to be employed to catch those crabs and fish and shrimp? But again, you and I know that these externalized costs are huge, and yet as a culture, we don't capture any of those externalized costs. I mean, MRSA, C. diff, those are superbugs created by subtherapeutic use of antibiotics in animal agriculture. You know, who captures the cost of that? In the cheap chicken and the cheap pork and the cheap dairy, who pays for the deaths from MRSA and the hospital stays from MRSA and C. diff and these superbugs? Who pays for that? And so, you know, I could go on, but you get my point. My point is that a society as clever as ours, you would think that somebody could capture the real negative costs of when aquifers are depleted, when surface waters are so toxic nothing can live in them, when you know, I mean, actually our life expectancy is dropping now for the last 2 years, and it has nothing to do with COVID. Our life expectancy is actually dropping because of all this, you know, cancer and diabetes and obesity and all that. So wouldn't it make sense to actually, you know, capture those negatives in the thing? So, you know, you ask a simple question, healthy progress. And I just come back to the fact that as a culture, we have not figured out how to capture the ecological, economic, and emotional negatives in the culture. And until we figure out how to capture that, it's going to be very hard to say, to create new targets and say, here's where we need to go, because we don't even know where we've been.
It's probably too hard to even possibly address, but yeah, if there was some sort of externality accounting framework that came in, then all of a sudden the conversation or the debate between, you know, large scale industrial agriculture and small scale regenerative or organic, the playing field is going to be leveled up, and I think I know which one would come out on top for sure. And
yeah, well,
yeah,
you
we're a
know,
culture.
yeah, well, you know, Patrick Holden in Great Britain, who truly has spearheaded this with what he calls true cost accounting, and he's actually worked with some, you know, very, very intelligent economists around the world to try to capture what's called true cost accounting. It certainly has its flaws and things, but I applaud him, you know, tremendously for leading in that effort, for bringing that conversation to the fore, and wrestling with, you know, with these externalized accounting situations.
I'll have to look that up. Sounds like good work. And yeah, I was just saying, our culture is very obsessed with growth, and unfortunately, that if on a nation level is focused on this GDP and growth in that way. And yeah, I know myself, I'm like absolutely driven by growth. I want to expand what we're doing here and do more and more, but it's about like where that's coming from and what's the nature of the growth, and just having an understanding that there is a point which is enough.
Yes, there is certainly a movement. It's called, you know, the minimalist movement, and I absolutely applaud it. We just had a friend in the other day who's a construction, works construction. He remodels houses and stuff, and he was saying that in the I think it was 1940s, maybe 1950s, maybe it was 1950s. Anyway, the average American house was, the average American house was like 1,200 square feet, and today the average American house is 3,000 square feet with one fewer child. And so this just notion that I need more stuff, more things, more, you know, a fancier car, fashion clothes. You know, I've done some blog posts occasionally on what if everybody bought stuff like I did, and I just articulated all the things that we wouldn't have, you know, that we actually don't need, and so I think the point, your point is well taken, and when people say, well, we need growth, no, you actually don't. You know, cancer is a growth too, and so just realize that growth in and of itself is not possible. Now, there are things that I do want to grow. I mean, I want to keep building more ponds because I want more water security. Okay, and that's a good thing, to eliminate flooding downstream and to allow to be able to utilize water in a drought. That's a good growth. So does the growth move us toward resiliency, or does the growth move us toward fragility? Because there are a lot of things in growth, like real-time inventorying. Now look at the supply chain snafus that have been created due to just-in-time inventorying, and so yeah, there are things that need to grow and things that don't. And I think the way to tell the difference is, does one lead us toward fragility or toward resiliency?
Absolutely. We're getting close to the end of our time here. I wanted to explore what is your relationship to God, and how does that relate to your relationship to the land?
Okay, yeah, it's a great question. And so I am a Christian, I am a believer, and I believe that God owns all this. I don't. I mean, the courthouse says that our family owns this land, but actually we don't own it. We're just pilgrims, and we're stewards of God's stuff. And so it makes me sit and think, is God pleased with what I'm doing here today? If it's his stuff and I'm just a steward, normally people who own things like a return on investment. So is desertification and eroding soil and sick cows, are those a good return on investment? I would say no. And so if you look at it, I mean, that sounds like an awfully economical way to look at something, a theological question, but I think it is that practical. And so when people say, what floats your boat, what gets you up every morning, what gets me up every morning is to know that I can walk out that back door and I can be the hands and feet of God. He entrusts me to caretake this, and it also means he has provided it for me, provided it in abundance. So often in agriculture, farmers view nature as some sort of a reluctant partner that I've got to force and push and kind of get in a half Nelson, and I'm gonna wrestle you and make you do this, and rather this is actually a benevolent lover that just wants to be caressed in the right places. And so as God has beneficently offered this in abundance to us, we need to return it. More soil, more breathable air, more water. We need to leverage all those things as a steward, so that his initial 1 becomes 1 + 1 = 3. And so we don't use the word commons enough. I think the commons, and I mean, it has its roots back in British jurisprudence, the commons, and it's when the king owned everything, and the commons was what the peasants could raise their sheep on and have their gardens on and things like that. But of course today the commons is what do I not own? I didn't put it all here. It was here before I got here. It will be here after I leave. And so how am I increasing the commons, which also includes cultural commons, understanding, neighborliness, good character, less crime, all of those are part of the commons equity, along with soil, air, water, you know, that I can be a part of. And so I very much view myself as a steward, which is both an honor, but it's also a huge responsibility, and it adds another dimension to, you know, to my daily work and my daily walk.
It's a beautiful answer, man. And here's a term in te reo, kaitiakitanga. It's the steward, of a person who stewards the land, and you just do that with the utmost integrity, and it's absolutely inspiring and brilliant for aspiring, you know, farmers and regenerative entrepreneurs like myself to be able to stand upon the shoulders of giants like yourself. And yeah, everything you're doing on Polyface Farms and the transition in one lifetime is just absolute evidence that we can turn this around. And yeah, you talk about the pigness of the pig and the chickenness of the chicken, and that's just such an ode of respect to God's creations, and letting those animals that are, you know, they are our business, but we can respect them as beings as well. So
Yes,
I just want to thank you so much for all your work, and also for this conversation. It's yeah, it's hit me real deep, man.
good. Well, thank you. It's been an honor and a pleasure to be with you, and I hope soon we'll be able to travel better, easier, and get back together and touch a little bit. That would be a real nice thing.
I'd love to be part of one of your gatherings, and I'd like to talk to one of your apprentices as well, and see if I could swing someone down New Zealand way and implement some polyface measures here on the Montana Flat.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Cool, Joel. You have a great evening, and I'm sure we'll be in touch again.
Yes, thank you very much. Take care.